Welcome to the Steve and Mark Discuss podcast, where Steve looks through the media globally and picks out something for us to discuss. As always, I do not know what he's going to talk about, which makes it interesting. Anyway, over to Steve.
Hi, people. So, a couple of podcasts ago, I predicted that the end of the conflict in Ukraine is nigh. And in spite of the comments made by NATO and even Ukraine and some talking heads in the mainstream news, they were saying that it's going to go on for years. This conflict. I still hold to the fact that it isn't, and it's even going to be shorter than it'll finish more or less around about the time that I said it would do when the cold weather snaps in. How do I know this now? What's confirming my thoughts on this is that recently 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered to the Russians. 10,000. And it's in the last few weeks. This is coming out of TASS, by the way, TASS news agency. What the Russians have done is they've opened a frequency on the radio of 149.200. I'm not a ham radio buff, so I don't know exactly what this frequency is. And the Ukrainians have to call Volga for some reason. I think it's like a password, Volga, and they get information of how to surrender, so that they won't be mistaken for combatants. The prisoners of war are being fed well, according to TASS, and they receive medical care. Now, some time ago, I think I said this on one of the podcasts as well about Ukraine, is that some of the combatant sergeants and the higher ups in the field would arrange for ceasefires with Russia, so they could remove their dead soldiers and the wounded soldiers back to the safe land. And the Russians allowed this to happen. So far, 810,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died in the conflict. And Zelensky didn't do a favor for himself when he went to Canada. And Trudeau, Zelensky, and also a German foreign minister all applauded, gave a standing ovation to an SS Nazi, 92-year-old Nazi, and created a ruckus on the world stage, which didn't help Ukraine very much. And so there you go. The Ukrainian soldiers are finding the safest way to end the conflict for themselves. They're not being killed, and it's going to put Zelensky in a situation where he's got no choice, because he's going to have no soldiers left, even though he is trying to conscript the ill, the old, the elderly, and women into the army, so that he can keep the battles going. And even the US is starting to give them less support now. So I think the end, once the cold weather comes in this year, That's going to be the end of it. He's going to have to negotiate. But that's what I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, this is from TASS, which is the official Russian news agency, in effect, I bet by Russia Today or whatever. Okay, so we'll put that as a rider. Um, the problem is you can't dismiss any news from anywhere. Um, Everything's propaganda from there. It probably got an element of truth in it, but anything could be elaborated,
Yep,
exaggerated.
we've always said this. You've got to look at both
Yeah,
sides. I haven't seen anything on the west, from the western side,
no.
uh, saying it's not true.
Well,
And, and the western
yeah,
reports of um, the battles that have been going on
yeah.
have said that there've been heavy losses for Ukraine,
Well, of course.
for the Ukraine. So it's only TASS that's been mentioned about
Yeah,
these 10,000
yeah.
Ukrainian soldiers surrendering.
Well, yeah. I mean, touched on a few points. I mean, obviously, the news that Zelensky went to Canada and they did a major faux pas with
So
faux pas. Yeah, I mean, you would hope that senior politicians and people around them would at least have a rudimentary grasp of at least recently living history. If they haven't, I've got a series of books behind me all about World War Two. If any politicians wishes to know something, please contact us and I'll look it up in the books, not the internet. I'll look it out of established books, um, all about World War Two, Second World War. So there's my offer to help the world a bit. Um, yeah, you just saw it, and what I mean, even I know Eastern Europe, you've got to be suspicious. You fought against the Russians. Hang on, weren't the Russians on our side? Whatever palatable or non palatable, look at the window, the time window. Yeah, fighting the Russians against invasion of Ukraine. Well, hang on, they're under German occupation at the time. Yeah, I mean, poor old Ukraine has always suffered this. It's always been invaded by one person or another. And at this moment, they're now suffering. They've finally got a bit of independence, and that's been taken away from them. I mean, I can understand both sides. The argument with Russia as well, with the White Russians, as we keep saying, you can't support what Russia have done, but they've been led into it. Even the NATO guy said, more or less, said the other day about, yeah, trying to put a different spin on it, in my opinion. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much going on at the moment. You can see people's faces; they are panicking. Yeah, I mean that publicity stunt in Canada the other day, and that's what it was. It was a publicity stunt for the cameras that really has blown back across the world. I'm going to be quite honest. The speaker fell on his sword. I quite like the guy actually. Whenever I've watched him, I found he's always been quite fair and even-handed in footage I've seen of there. I don't know. I'm not a big follower of Canadian politics. Yeah, I watch occasional things, but I'm not. It's not my country. Um, I really don't know how Trudeau's going to hang on now with any credibility. He can blame just about anyone. He managed to try and turn it around and blame Putin the other day. I mean, you got to hand it to the Russians. They were quick in with a quick response. I mean, I'm not. Yes, I'm laughing. I'm not supporting Russia, but the
Well,
way that they said it,
it
yeah,
wasn't so much Russia. It was the West,
yeah,
the
yeah,
West
exactly. But
that broke the news.
well, that's it. I mean, but the Russians must
It's
have been,
the Russians came up second place,
yeah,
in
but
close second place, wanting explanations.
yeah. I mean,
Poland even wants the guy to be extradited to Poland
of course.
to face war crime.
Well, yeah.
War crime.
Yeah. The Polish have never forgiven the Nazis. To be quite honest, I mean, there's ties between the Polish and Germany, but yeah, I've
Well,
got
Auschwitz, I wouldn't say.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah, there were members of my family that were in Polish members. There were Polish members of my family that were in a concentration camp, bluntly. So I won't say I've heard firsthand. I've heard things about the yeah, and how it affects people, how it affects people in later life. When these people get old, they've seen some horrific things, and that's all I'll say on that. I'm not going to give a history lesson here, unless there's any politicians that would like to know anything. I'm more than happy to assist. Um, it is a, I mean, it's an incredible situation. We're in the 21st century, and we still don't know what's going on. Or I cannot imagine that people across different countries do not know what's going on. We're not being told anything, quite frankly. Um, we moan about, we keep criticising there's no freedom of media or the press in Russia. I mean, there's been some recent events across this part of the world, our part of the world, that maybe suggest that Russia is not the main culprit there. But we'll leave that for another time. Um, yeah, I mean, we keep saying that there's no way that that war can continue. I mean, maybe Russia's quite happy to just soak it all up and wait for things to happen. I mean, there's all sorts of talk that the West have been doing this in the Ukraine to keep the Russians occupied, to wear the Russians down. There doesn't appear to be much evidence that that's actually working. Yes, is Russia probably going into some sort of recession? Of course, it's going to be inevitable. It's going to be hit by a few things. Um, the UK and Europe are in a recession, so the world is. It's a global problem. Um, so yeah, well, all I can say is personally, I do hope that they do start talking. Hopefully tomorrow or as soon as possible, because I don't want to see any more Ukrainian or Russian deaths or any other deaths at all. I'll be quite honest. I just want the killing to stop.